Let's move on to the next part of the homework. It says, what is the top number in the time signature if each problem is one complete measure? So how do we do that? The answer is that whatever the bottom number is, that number, and in this case we have a 4, that number tells us the type of rhythm that we're using, or the type of duration we're using to get one beat. So in this case, a quarter note equals one beat. Now what we need to do is see how many of those quarter notes are there in the measure. So we have 1, 2, and 2/8 notes makes 3. So the top number is 3, and we have waltz time, our 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's look at the next one. Next one's got a 4 as well. So we need to count how many quarter notes we have, or how many fourth notes we have. So let's look at the small notes and different notes here that are written and combine them together to create one quarter note chunks. It's an eighth note, which is half a quarter note. And that's a 2/16 note, which equals 1/8 note, or half a quarter note. The whole thing together is one quarter note beat. Same thing for this actually. That's 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, and then 4/16 here. So that whole thing equals 1/4. There's just a standalone quarter note, and 2/8 notes equals a quarter. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. So our answer here is 4. Next one, it says 16. So each 16th note equals one beat. So we have 1, 2, 3 of them. And so on and so forth. Let's look at the next thing here. It says, beam the notes correctly in each time signature. So how do we beam notes? And the answer is, we beam notes, if we can, one beat at a time. So we see whatever the beat unit is, in this case the beat unit equals a quarter note. Pen here is trying to write exclamation points. So what we need to do is find quarter note chunks and put all that stuff together. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 fourths of a beat, or 4/16 notes. So we should just put them all together and convert those flags into beams. Okay, then we have here 2/16. That makes an eighth, or a half of beat. Here's another half of beat, another eighth. So let's actually just take the whole thing, put it together. Then over here we can just rewrite it. So I'm just doing little slashes: 1, 2, 3, 4 16ths, and 2/16, and an eighth. Just make these a little bit higher. Make sure these are all going through. And then these ones. And in this case, we can put the 16ths and eighths together. So long as they each have a flag, they can be put together. Any type of things with flags can be put together, and then just convert to different amounts of beams. So this has only one flag, which equals one beam. And then this has 2 of them, because there's 16ths. eighths over here. Okay, oops. And it also says write in the counts. Well, let's go back and do that in a second here. So, how do we beam this thing 3/16? Well, this is a bit of a strange one, because normally we beam things by the beat. The problem is there's kind of another thing that goes on, which is people think it's difficult to read and kind of weird looking just to leave things with flags by themselves. So even though in this case a 16th is one beat, so we should just technically just leave them by themselves and not beam them together. It's much more typical for people just to say that looks weird, and if something has a flag on it, try to beam it together. So you could write this either way. You could just do nothing and just leave these as is with their flags here, just chilling. Or you could take the flags and kind of pull them together and make the beam. So we'll do that. And there we go. You might see either of these, especially in older vocal music. It was common to leave things by themselves. And put one note per syllable with no beaming. Nowadays, typically people don't do that. They just beam them anyways, irrespective of vocal music. Okay, so let's actually skip the counts on those for a moment and just do counts in another place. Let's look at the counts down here, because this asks us to do a bunch of stuff anyways. It says in the time signature, what does it say? In the time signature, add a bar lines. If the final measure is complete, add the final bar line, write in the counts. Okay, so now we have to count up beats to see, to properly divide these bunches of notes into measures. And then afterwards we have to count. This is 4/4, so that means we have to have 4 quarter note beats. There's 1, 2, 3, and let's see, that's 2/16 equals a half. And that's eighth, which equals a half, so that's 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 things total, so we'll put a bar line right there. Go ahead and erase this for just a moment because we're going to put some counts down here. So now let's count this thing. Whenever we count full beats, we just give things like this. We just give 1, 2, 3, 4 full numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. But if we do things in half beats, divide up the beat into 2 parts, that equals 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If we divide things into fourths of beats, 16th notes in the case of a quarter, but it doesn't really matter so long as the whatever the beat unit is divided up into fourths, that equals the main beat plus the 3 other little parts that make it up. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and so it's the number that we have, right here, and then however many parts we broke it into left over. So 1, 2, 3 extra parts. This whole thing here is 4 parts because 4 16th notes. This whole thing here is the number plus one other thing because it's 2 eighth note parts that we have to represent for each beat, since the beat is broken into 2 parts. It actually doesn't matter if it's a quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, or whatever. It really just matters how much we divide the main beat up into. We'll see that in a second, but meanwhile, let us write in these counts. So this is a beat broken into 2 parts, eighth notes, so it's 1 and then it's broken into 4 parts. We're on the second beat, so we go 2 E and Next we have here 3, and we would normally say and at the end, but we have to talk about the 16th notes. So we can go 3 E and like that, or we can just go 3 and because we know since we end up on the and that we must have had this E there beforehand. We must have first said this E if we get to the and part, because the E is the second part and is the last 2 quarters of a beat divided into 4 parts. Musicians often do the more simple one. They'll go 3 and 4 and this type of thing, and they won't bother saying the E. You can say that too, though. Let's just remember where we are in these little fractional divisions. Okay, cool. Next, we finished the whole third beat, so now we're 4. We don't play this or do anything because it's a rest, but we still need to count it so we know where we are. 4, E, and this 8th note can get the and because it's 2 parts, 2 16th notes in value. Or we can just do this instead. We can go 4, E, and, because people know that the is implied. Okay, so let's do the next part here. Actually, I think we have enough knowledge already for these 4/4 stuff, So let's look at something that's not in 4/4. 3/2, or, well, let's try that one. 3/2. So this is kind of strange for us maybe because we're saying that instead of counting with quarter notes, we're going to say that a half note equals 1 beat. So what does that mean? That also means that a quarter note would be like a half beat. And then an 8th note equals a quarter of a beat. And so for counting purposes then, since I've divided up the beat into 4 parts here, then I would have to count 8th notes with this 1, E, and style counting. That's because since the beat is a half note, 8th notes are dividing that half note into 4 parts. So what does that mean when we're writing it out? That means we go 1, E, and then a half note is 1 count, so we just give it 2. Here, 3, and it looks like a hat note to me here, so I go half note, and that's 4. 1 E and 2, 3. Oh yeah, we have to put in the bar line. Now we go 1, and these quarter notes are not the beat. Remember, half note is a beat, and quarter notes are half the beat, so that's 1, then 2, and 3, and then draw on the bar line. 1 and 2 and 3, bar line. Then we have 1, oops, let's redo that. 1, 2, and, well, there's no 3. We never finished that, so we don't have a bar line. So that's it for us at this point. No bar line.